Hi, welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. In this tutorial episode, I'm going to show you how to create the Wrapped Up Christmas Postcard artwork I did. This is something that I had created a bow on an ornament for my father-in-law, kind of as a joke. But I loved how the bow turned out, and I thought, I've got to do another project so I can show you how easy it was to create the bow and what good results you'll get. So this is what I came up with. I hope you'll like it, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how easy it is to create. So let's get to work. Begin by burning in the straight pattern lines. I'm using a knife tip, or a pin tip I like to call a knife tip. It's actually the rounded heel pin tip. As you burn in the lines, try to keep your hand, wrist, and elbow in a locked position. Then move your arm from the shoulder. Move it as one unit. Start at the top and pull your arm back as you burn down the board. This will give you straighter burn results. After the straight lines are burned in, switch to a rider pin tip and finish the lines around the tag. I am using a micro rider pin tip, but a standard rider pin tip will also work just fine. Then burn in the dots on the tag ribbon by holding the pin tip to the wood for a half second or so. Afterwards, burn in the To From label on the tag. Notice how I reburned several times to darken up the labels. Now burn in the trace lines along the edges of each bow loop. You want the lines to be on the thicker side and very easily seen. Do not burn in the dashed lines on each bow loop. Switch to a shader pin tip and very lightly burn in the dashed lines using the razor edge of the shader. You want these lines to be very thin and light in color. The reason is that the contrast between the types of lines will make it very easy to see individual bow loops. After you are done burning in the trace lines, rub over the board with a standard pencil eraser to remove any residual graphite. Now fill in the straight segments of ribbon to a uniform color. I am using uniform strokes for this. It is easier to get uniform color when burning with the grain than across it. The board I'm burning on has horizontal grain lines, thus the reason for my burn direction. I am keeping my burn strokes aligned with the grain direction. I did put some ribbon and a bow on a board and took a picture to use as a reference photo. To make it easier, I will be using my final artwork to walk you through the needed steps, as the ribbon and bow have been converted to the tans and brown hues of Pyrography. Rotate the board and burn along the opposite edge of the ribbon. Make sure your pin tip is in optimal position so the edges are crisp and clean. Then fill in the ribbon with uniform color. Keep in mind that you can use any shader for this. Larger shaders will make the burning process go quicker, and I should have switched to a larger one. Also, you can use any burn stroke that you like that produces the desired results. I provide these videos showing you how I did the artwork, but that doesn't mean it is the only way to create it. Find what works best for you. Repeat the same process with the next ribbon segment. Make sure to keep the color the same as the first segment of ribbon. Use care when working near the tails of this ribbon segment. Make sure to shorten your burn strokes as needed And keep your pen tip in optimal position when working along the edges. At this point, I don't have anything new or grand to tell you about the straight ribbon segments. With each segment, you need to burn along the edges and then fill it to a uniform color that matches the other ribbon segments. As you can see, I switched shaders, opting for a medium-sized shader to get the burning done a bit quicker. The shader I am using is Colwood's D shader. Let's begin with the bottom loop on the bow. Use a shader and burn in the brown bands or streaks on the loop. Burn along the edge of the band and then fill it with uniform brown color. The bow loops have a total of 4 colors on them: pale or light tan, tan, dark tan, and brown. There are 2 ways to burn in the loops. The first is to burn in the brown bands and then work your way progressively down the colors, ending with the lightest one. The second way is to start on one side, left or right, doesn't matter, and burn in each band as you work your way to the opposite side of the loop. With the brown bands done, now burn in the remaining bands. Please keep in mind that with this first loop, I'm establishing the values for the 4 colors. So bear with me, as I promise it will get easier from here out. Now rotate the board and burn the gap next to the loop to a dark brown color, keeping your pen tip in optimal position while you do so. Then burn a line along the end of the loop to better define it. Rotate the board again, if needed, to be able to burn along the opposite edge of each band with the pen tip in optimal position. This is to make sure each band has very crisp or clearly defined edges. Now fine-tune if needed. For me, I'm establishing the final values that I will be using for each of the 4 colors. Darkly burn along the gap edges you can easily do at this angle while keeping your pen tip in optimal position. Then burn in the brown bands on this bow loop. Burn along the edges of the band and then fill it with a uniform brown color. I am also going to burn in the dark tan bands to the left of this large brown band that I am starting to work on. I am mostly using uniform strokes for this, but I do also use some zigzags in areas where the flat of my shader doesn't fit as well. Afterwards, resume edging along the brown bands and filling them in with uniform color. The video is a little jumpy because I removed my pauses and the times I'm moving my hand to a new position. As you are working on the brown bands, make sure the color you burned them matches the color on the first bow loop. Now burn in the dark tan band and burn in the little brown line on the far right. My hand completely blocked the view of what I was doing, so an arrow is pointing to the spot I'm referring to. Next, burn in the tan band on the far right of the loop. Again, I am using uniform strokes to do this. Then burn in the remaining band to a pale tan color. Afterwards, do any fine-tuning that is needed. Rotate the board and darkly burn next to the edge of the bow loop on the gap. Then fill in the gap with uniform dark brown color. As you fill in the gap, avoid the little bit of ribbon that peeks through. An arrow is pointing to the spot. After you are done burning the gap to a uniform dark brown color, then burn over that little bit of ribbon till it is a dark tan color. A green circle marks our next loop we will work on. Begin by burning in the gap to the right of the loop. Burn the gap to a dark brown color. Afterwards, burn in the loop using the method of your preference. You can work right to left or vice versa, or burn in all the brown bands and work your way progressively down to the light tan ones. Either way, work one band at a time. You might have noticed that I burned past the upper loop edge. This isn't a problem since there is a dark gap above the loop. Once the gap gets burned in, my overburn will be hidden. Rotate the board and darkly burn along the edge of the bow loop. Keep your pin tip in optimal position as you burn. Then burn in the pale tan band on the loop and do any fine-tuning that may be necessary. Let's work on the gap some more. There are several areas where the bow loops are partially seen. Burn in the area marked with a green circle on the inset photo. As you work, avoid the little bit of the bow loop that is visible. Now we will work on the adjacent bow loop to the left. Just like before, burn in one band on the loop at a time. Consult with the reference photo to determine what color the band should be. At least 95% of the time, I am using uniform strokes to fill in the bands with color. And truth be told, is probably closer to 99% of the time. Rotate the board as needed while you work. Most of the individual bands need very crisp, clearly defined edges. There are a couple of exceptions, but those loops will get discussed later on. What I'm doing here is using the razor edge of the shader to burn down into the bottom of that missing sliver of wood. As you can see, this board has a lot of missing slivers of wood. Slivering, as I call it, is something I've only encountered with plywoods. Some boards are worse than others, but so far, every piece of plywood I've ever burned on has this feature, including die-cut woods like this one, panel boards, and cradle boards. Rotate the board, if needed, and burn in the gaps between the bow loops as marked with the green circle on the inset photo in the upper left corner. The gaps need to be a uniform dark brown color. After you burn in the gaps, then burn the little section of loop to a tan color. Then burn in the gaps near the remaining loop in this area. Our next bow loop is the far left one, but on the screen it appears as the bottom loop. Like before, burn in the bands individually and consult with the reference photo to see which of the four colors the band should be. Don't get discouraged if you think your bow isn't looking very metallic. Truth be told, individual bow loops are rather unremarkable looking. The magic happens when you're done with all of the loops and you look at the bow as a whole. Then it transforms into a very metallic looking bow. I didn't like the poor or low contrast between the ribbon and the bow, so I'm reburning over the ribbon to darken it up. Afterwards, I fine-tuned the bow loop. Plus, I made a small deviation from the reference photo. I increased the width of the middle brown band so that its right edge didn't line up with the ribbon below it. For some reason that was bugging me, so I changed it. Now we will work on the adjacent loop. Again, it is a matter of burning in one band at a time. Consult with the reference photo to determine what color to burn in the band. First, burn along the edges of a band and then fill it in with uniform color. As I said before, I use uniform strokes to do the burning. The strokes can be burned vertically or horizontally, as the only goal is to create a uniformly colored band. Move on to the next loop and burn in the gaps next to the loop. Then proceed to burn in one band at a time on this bow loop. There really isn't anything complex to this process. It really is a simple matter of concentrating on one bow loop at a time, then working on one band at a time. You check with the reference photo to determine the color of the band, then you fill the band in with that color, burning it uniformly. With this adjacent loop, there is a small reflection from a nearby loop along the lower edge. Other than that, this loop is just like all the other loops we have already worked on. So burn in each band individually and check with the reference photo to determine what color that band should be. Now burn in the top loop on the bow. Again, this is a standard bow loop, so burn in each band individually to a uniform color based on the reference photo. There is an opening in the loop, and you can see the underlying board through it. Quite truthfully, you can leave the opening as it is or treat it like any other gap and burn it to a dark brown color. Remember to rotate the board as needed while you work. Some angles or directions are easier to burn in than others. Let's work on the center of the bow. Start with the curved reflection along the upper edge of the center loop. Then start working on the gap to the right of the center loop. Next, burn some pull-away strokes along the upper edge of the gap. Start the stroke on the edge and pull it down towards the bottom. The bow center has some loops that are partially visible but in shadows, so we don't want the gap to be uniform dark brown in color. Instead, we will build up the color in the center, starting with a dark tan to brown color. Rotate the board if needed and reburn along any edges that aren't clearly defined. Then resume burning in the bow center. The arrow is pointing to a spot with a touch of gradient color. The spot starts out very dark along the edges and fades to a light brown in the center, whereas this spot, marked with an arrow, is mostly dark brown that fades just 1 or 2 shades in the center. As you work on the center, rotate the board as needed so your pen tip is in optimal position when burning along the edges. With this last little segment, burn pull-away strokes along the upper edge to fill it with gradient color that stays in the tan ranges. Let's burn in the center bow loop. Begin by burning in the curved depression along the left edge. I am using circular motion and uniform strokes to burn in this area. Then burn a dark tan band that follows the curve along the bottom edge. Reburn the right edge of the band to a brown color. Afterwards, Burn the area around the band to a tan color. Extend the color to the start of the pale tan band and then burn in that band too. Then, if needed, do any fine-tuning on this and on any of the previous loops. I try to fix any uneven spots I see to make them more uniform in color. I also darkened up a few areas here and there. The last thing we need to do on this loop is burn in the shadow marked with an arrow. Rotate the board if needed so your pen tip is in optimal position while you burn it in. The next two loops we will do are the upper right ones. There is nothing unique about the loops. Burn in each band individually after consulting with the reference photo to determine how dark to burn in the band. I continue to use uniform strokes to do the burning. You can do the same or use the burn stroke of your preference. Make sure to rotate the board as needed while you work to ensure the bands have crisp, clean edges on them. Our next loop is the right one, and we will start with the gap to the left of it. Begin by burning pull-away strokes that start on the edge of the loop and pull the stroke in a curved arch towards the center of the bow. The lower or bottom corner of this gap is dark brown and it fades to a brown color. Not far from the upper corner is a wide brown curving line, and the color fades a bit to the left of it. The rest of the gap should be a very dark tan or light brown color. Now burn in the bow loop. This loop and the remaining two loops are basic bow loops. I will recap the process of burning in the bow loops, and then I'll play some of Todd's music as the last of the loops get finished up. First, the recap. Burn one bow loop at a time. Break down each loop into individual bands of color. There are a total of 4 colors used to create the loops: pale tan, tan, dark tan, and brown. Consult with the reference photo and determine which color the band should be. Then burn the band uniformly to that color. Work each loop from right to left or vice versa. Or you can burn in the dark bands first and then work your way down towards the light ones. Well, that's it for the explanation on bows. So until it's time to burn in the tag, you'll get to listen to some music. Let's burn in the tag and finish up this project. Keep your pen tip in optimal position and burn along both edges of the outer border on the tag. Rotate the board as needed to do this. The goal with the border is to burn it to a uniform dark tan color with thin dark brown edges. It took me a couple of reburns before I got the border the way that I wanted it to look. I am using uniform strokes to burn in the border. In some areas, my strokes are very small because the border is not that big. Also, I used the razor edge of the shader to create the thin, dark brown edges on the border. Any sort of knife tip, similar to one of them in the inset photo, would work great for creating that dark thin line. In fact, using a pen tip, like one of them in the photo, would make it much easier to create the thin dark brown border versus using the razor edge of the shader like I did. Now let's work on the tag ribbon. Burn along the edges of the ribbon end and then fill in the end with gradient color. I am using pull-away strokes to create the gradient color. Start the stroke on the end of the ribbon and pull it towards the center of the ribbon, stopping the stroke when you near the halfway mark. Both ends of each ribbon segment need to be filled with gradient color. The combination of darker ends with gradient color that fades at the center will create the illusion that the ribbon is bowing. As you work, rotate the board as needed so you can work along the edges without burning past them. That was just another way of saying keep your pen tip in optimal position when working near edges. Switch to a writer pen tip and darkly burn in the rectangular area that the ribbons are emerging from. Also, if desired, reburn the dots on the ribbon to enlarge them. The very last thing that I did was burn the remainder of the tag to a light tan color. I used uniform strokes for this. My burner is set to a pretty low heat setting, so I didn't have to worry about the pen tip getting too hot very quickly. Keep in mind that if you want to add color to this project, the tag and the wrapping paper would be the perfect place to do that. My main goal with this project was to show you how to create a metallic looking bow. Once you understand how to do that, you could put a bow on any project that you want to. Well, that's it. I hope the bow was easier to create than you thought it would be. Leave a comment and let me know what you think. On my website, Pyrography Made Easy, I have the written version of this tutorial along with the reference photo and a free pattern that you can download. Well, thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you next week.